I'm just going to introduce the session. So we have today, we're very lucky to have today Giulio Marini, which already presented last week about Brexit, a quite interesting presentation showing how successful Brexit was. And today we have Giulio and Viviana. So Giulio is from the University of Catania and Viviana is from the University of Bergamo. And basically they bring us today this topic: British universities issuing voluntary redundancies, manifest and latent functions. For those of you who might not know, redundancies means people who get fired. Yes. All right. And what's your job? So, what is your
Thanks. Yeah, so it's Christmas time, so time about talking the microphone for people who are perhaps over Zoom or something. Okay. So Christmas time, isn't it? So after Brexit, now something about redundancies. Well, actually, what voluntary redundancies are, they might be called also severances, schemes, etc. So it's about giving some money, sometimes it's a lot of money, for making employees leave voluntarily. Okay, so basically it's about a company, public company, or even a university decided that some staff are not really needed. So they might have a plan about who exactly may match the definition of a person who is not anymore needed. And since there are some national regulations about firing for real people, you give money and then you do it freely. So it has to do with Christmas actually, because people might be fired without any money. In that case, it's about receiving money. Now the calculation of money is mostly dependent by salary and years of service in that specific place. So if you have worked 30 years and you are 55, they wanna make you then redundant, which means we don't really need you here because we already have people teaching this and that, etc. You might receive actually more than 1 year of salary after taxation without working. So may look like even Christmas. Usually is a kind of program. So people need to apply, formally speaking, and it is basically run after some institutional strategy about human resources. Okay, so in this case, the university may decide to refresh or to clean up, to reduce staff, etc. And so there is a machinery. Okay, it's a legal one. In most cases, and that's from some literature and also from the data I personally collected, it's an offer you can't refuse. I don't know whether you're familiar with Godfather movies about Italo-American people in New York, etc. Sounds like mafia. Okay. The cinema reference here is Dobson Choice, which is a theater piece, an English one. There are also some movies about Dobson Choice. I watched one of these from perhaps the 50s. It is black and white, pretty nice one. So in that case, the offer you can't refuse is that basically you are forced to marry someone. That's that kind of, but I don't want to spoil that kind of movie, okay? But you can, Dobson Choice, you can retrieve by yourself. It is quite widespread in the private sector, even public companies, because of neoliberal ideas, etc. And usually it is linked to performance management kind of ideas. Now, in higher education, that's mostly an untold story. When you look at references, there are very few of them. One, for instance, in Australia. Australia is basically, like England, but even worse, many regards. But it is, I mean, even in terms of education or in this kind of specialized press, they're not, I mean, there are some news about, oh, now there is a plan in the University of Manchester about, making some 50 people redundant or something like that. So you might get some news, about possible redundancies, but you don't have scientific papers, not many. One of the best articles I read is basically a self-case. So it is a person who was made redundant and made a diary out of it. And it was a crazy kind of experience, and it was in Australia. So it is very common, as I said, but basically we don't really know that much. It may happen in any university, more likely in, I wouldn't say more likely in teaching-oriented universities, but in teaching-oriented universities, it can be a more harsh kind of experience. And they have less money, maybe more pressure to do it, whereas in Russell Group universities or in a university like this one, okay, which is great in rankings, etc., they do it because they want to do it. They don't really have to, but they want. It is extremely confidential. You cannot really disclose details, and so you don't have figures of any kind. So you cannot go public and say, well, you can't even speak because your mouth is not stuffed with gold. And that's a quotation from one of the interviewees. Key role of line managers, I would say also head of departments. Viviana will speak about that in its very implementation, because the university, but then you need to implement that. So the middle managers down even to line managers are key in deciding who is gonna be made redundant for real, because you might have 3 individuals who may apply, may match the criteria. So from the university point of view, they don't care who is ABC. So it is gonna be the head of the department or the line manager to decide actually who's gonna disappear from the place with money, but disappear. Do you know what the line manager is? No. Hugo knows, because when Hugo visited my used to be place at UCL, he understood quite quickly, as I did, that it's a strange place with line managers. Line manager means that you are recruited and you have one person who is your boss. So you want to apply for holidays and you want to go somewhere else, you need to speak to your line manager. There is the story of this American manager in academia who wanted to go to the States or something to visit the mother who was very sick. He was denied by the university, and this happens by a line manager. When I was myself trying to visit home in Bergamo, when I was still there, I was denied. And I said, look, I mean, I'm a European Union citizen with settled status. So talking about Brexit a little more. But I was told, no, you cannot do that. But in fact, I could. Solution was to leave, basically. So back to the issue of this date. And actually, I also applied for this one. But one of the, usually one of the conditions to get the money is to don't have another job offer. So you cannot cash the money and at the same time get in another position somewhere else. It is forbidden. They don't give you the money for that. They might have not, I mean, perhaps they could have given to me the money anyway because I was going abroad, but then I gave up the procedure. And for myself, after 6 years and a half of service at UCL with my salary, which was not good, I made the calculation to something like £7,000 without taxation to be paid. So it was some money. So if you have 20, 25 years, you can. Okay. But UCL is generous. Other universities are by far less generous about this. Arguably very stressful for all. Arguably is ironic. Okay? It is really, really something you want to avoid. One of the HR director I interviewed personally, he was very sincere. He said, I mean, it's something you want to avoid in life to do this. It's really stressful, especially if then people apply to go to tribunal. That's become attorney's kind of job, and it is really stressful. So people don't talk that much about that. It is mostly about older people. And usually they want to get rid of those who are 55 and above, something like that. Also for having higher salaries. So drivers for having this kind of policy, institutional policy, is always institutional. The first ever policy about redundancies in universities in the UK was in the 80s. It's a long story, a long ago story, a long time ago story, and well, in case I will tell you about that, there's also some few other references about the US dating back the 90s, but they were doing things so naively. How they learned how to do that from public companies or other private corporations. So usually it is a matter of looking at key performance indicators, such as, you have tests from the states you try to build, and therefore all of a sudden you need to go back to the banks and show that you can pay back. And you do that saying that, okay, now I will reduce what I pay for staff. So financial problems, but also greedy HR management based on refreshing personnel. So getting rid of those thinking one way with few new people thinking in a new way. So usually people who are 30 something, they're still enthusiastic about working in higher education. So it's not only about performance management, there's also a story about latent function. I'm shortly leaving the microphone for Viviana. Latent function means that, we'll discuss it. Leave that maybe to you, and then maybe the last few slides back to me. Okay?
Okay, thank you. So I just put a diagram here to show a little bit how, we were talking about what line managers assign, what they do. So in the UK, it's quite it doesn't look like externally, but actually it's quite a hierarchical system where, for example, you have a department, so you have head of department, and then you have line managers, sometimes they're also called fancily called subject group leaders, SGL, and they have their own academics, 1, 2, 3. I mean, I just put some numbers. There are lecturers, senior lecturers, maybe not a very, very big group. And if you're here, having a good relationship with your line manager, it's very important. Well, as everywhere. But these line managers, they have quite an important say when it comes to workload allocation. So you can go to your line manager and say, look, I don't really like teaching that module. Please put me on leadership next year, leadership module instead of HRM, for example, please, I would like to do more with postgrad students and not with undergrad. Undergrad students, they are difficult sometimes, big numbers, and so on. So if you have a good relationship with your SGL, it's a heaven. And typically you get a very good workload, and they can really help, to arrange maybe your schedule in the way you prefer. And clearly, when it comes to promotion, manager will come to you. And at some point, I had a wonderful relationship with my SGL. And once she came to me, I didn't even think of promotion. And she said, Viviana, you are ready, go ahead. And if the line manager has a good relationship with the head of department, that's great. Because when afterwards, the head of the department came to my office and said, Viviana, I know about your promotion, I will push for it. And I got it. But if you don't have a good relationship, or if something is happening higher up, actually, even being a head of the department or a manager might be quite challenging, Why we introduce this topic of a head of department? Because actually, you might think of head of department and line managers as well. It's a kind of middle management, They have all the academics, clearly you consider yourself as a peer, and they say, oh, we're not happy about this, we're not happy about that, and so on. And then you have the dean or higher up people saying, oh, you need to tell your people to do this, and that. So people here might be in a quite uncomfortable position sometimes, especially when there's restructuring coming up. Now, actually some details about the data. This was mostly a qualitative study with a lot of interviews run by Giulio, involving 8 institutions in the UK. People from academics to head of the department and people in HR as well were involved. And also these institutions, they represent, some of them are very good kind of Russell group, high-rank institutions, others are more teaching-oriented, so what I call the post-92, so universities which before the 92 reform were considered polytechnic kind of second choice or professional vocational training. We put some quotes because some of these quotes, they are just great. Apologies, they are quite long, but they really represent very well what we are talking about. So let's start first with the head of department, so what they say. So here we have a head of department talking about, a period of restructuring. The vice chancellor at the time said, I don't want anybody here who's not happy. And therefore, we're opening the door to voluntary redundancy, if you're not happy here, basically, you go. Notice some people were designated as essential, so they couldn't apply. This is why the application process is important, If you consider essential somehow, they draw a kind of profile, they profile people. If you're essential, you're not even able to apply, you can't apply. Surprise, surprise, we even got more people than expected. Clearly people who were not happy, they prefer to apply for redundancy instead of staying. So, and notice also the kind of names they give to, this initiative, let's say this measure. Consultation period, so senior managers will come and say, this is the situation in a particular school. So they ask to head of department, what are we going to do? So basically, people higher up there, they go to the head of department and basically say, look, we need to get rid of 10 people. What's the point in your department? What can you do? And the head of the department will have to think about the profiles we want to get rid of, And it's also interesting the language. So we talk here the level of human resource required to go forward. And given this opportunity, so this voluntary redundancy from people higher up, they kind of depict it as an opportunity. Of course, you might see this as an opportunity because you get maybe 10 months of salary, but what's coming then? Especially for people who are not very far from retirement, actually it might have quite a bad impact on the pension. Maybe if you're younger, you don't bother, but typically they don't really offer it to the youngest, to the more junior scholars. So next, this is another approach in another university. And again, this head of department is stressing on the fact that it's quite good to have people who volunteer because, they are volunteers. You're not pushing people out. It's their choice. At the end, it's their choice, individual choice. This is helpful because you don't have to oblige people to go. Of course, it's costing us a lot because he says we are very generous, in terms of our severance, so it's a cost for us. And then he's thinking about, what happened in the last round of redundancy, saying that, I think more or less the process was okay. An issue which is introduced here is about the feelings of people who remain, who stay there. Sometimes they are called the survivors. So people who stay, they might be people who are not interested at all, but at the end they are colleagues. And sometimes we will see what happens is that in departments, they get rid of 10 people, but they don't necessarily hire other 10 people. So clearly the workload is increasing. So what about the survivors? The climate sometimes is getting quite tricky, it's a bit an uncomfortable atmosphere. And that is another problem. I think that is another very, very interesting, which might refer to, we will talk about the latent function later on. This head of the department says, I don't want to create fear But people should understand that university is a mission. Sometimes that changes. There are consequences. So you need to deal with it. You need to come to terms with it. And culturally, here people don't think about the consequences. So we need to kind of teach them to think about consequences. But I don't want to create any fear. So this is the way he started introducing. Let's see now what academics say. So people who are basically down here, as I said, you have a very broad range of profiles. You might have very junior lecturers, you might have a more experienced senior lecturer, and so on. It's interesting, this person saying it was very obvious to us, even before starting the course, to figure officially who would be leading. Again, people somehow know, people can perceive from the atmosphere going around. And there's always a little bit of a chit chat around that. Who will have a kind of profile they are looking for? But this person is also saying the communication around that was very poor. So we had basically students coming in looking for the stuff where we were redundant and they couldn't find the stuff, So that was very poor and very challenging for the survivors to manage as well. And personally, I have to say, it happened to me while I was working in the UK that my institution went for restructuring. So they made an whole way of, a good number of people redundant. One of these persons was in my office as well. I was sharing the office with her. She was great with students, but from one day to another, her module was basically handled to somebody else. To me, in that case, I was very junior. It was the first time I was handling a very big module. But imagine these poor students in the middle of the term. She disappeared. And the funny thing, it was very badly managed because she had to leave at some point just a few weeks before they were due to submit the assignment. So the students were feeling very uncomfortable because we were saying, okay, so we follow their lectures and then we're submitting the assignment but with you. So what's happening then? And this is what happens sometimes. People don't really higher up, they don't really think about this kind of details, how you're going to manage the students. Another experience, 3 rounds of restructuring. So this academic experience, the 3 rounds of restructuring, she was a kind of, survivor as well. And what he's saying, we become accustomed to this possibility of redundancy. So we know it will come regularly, People left, many people left, some of them with their mouth stuffed with gold, as Giulio was saying before. Others were happy, but we know it might happen, Our impression when we read these sentences, we listen to this interview, is that people at the end, they find some way to deal with it. We're not extremely happy, but they have no choice, really. Well, that is another case. The department losing, around half members of staff, this is, and basically they were not replaced, so people got additional hours. So again, from the survivor's perspective, it's quite hard. And that is very interesting about what head of departments are doing. This is told by an academic, not by a head of department. But he's telling the story of a head of a department who basically was asked by the senior team to choose, to pick, to kind of push some people to apply. Apparently the head of a department was really even happy, to convince 5 people to go. But afterwards, he realized they were not going to replace the staff. Well, we were discussing, if you are head of the department, you should be a little bit more skilled in understanding what will happen when, from the senior team they're telling you, please, 5 people who need to go, and what happens afterwards. We would say quite a naive head of the department. I don't know, but we were quite kind of surprised, getting to know this, that a head of the department couldn't really understand earlier on what was going on. And finally, I think this is the last one. This academic is reflecting on the fact that actually a lot of people leaving the university are going to work in the private sector. And he was saying, well, till a few years ago, you would have expected that people are academic for life and that academia somehow is a more desirable kind of environment when compared to the private sector, but I see many people leaving. And that's interesting. We don't have the data, but that would be very interesting to see how many people are going to the private sector, because personally, I had this experience as well of, seeing the people going to work in the private sector and telling me, this is great, I feel much better here. That's an interesting point. So the private sector somehow becoming more friendly, more attractive. So question mark, we are not really sure, but it's an interesting thing to keep in mind. So probably the kind of pressures that nowadays universities in the UK are going through, they're not making it a very appealing career choice for people who are so skilled, like many academics. Back to go, Giulio. Should I continue?
Yes, so you just got showcase. You might have noticed that many of those bar teams are from case P for pickup. That's a place you would struggle to call the university if you happen to visit that place, which I don't recommend for the weather conditions. That's great, probably because it was winter time as well. And but I will show you in the very last slide comparative table with all the 8 institutions. Now, key features of academic work these days. Now, the teaching function is understood as is indispensable. So basically, in the paper we wrote, so long we have not submitted yet, we link this specific tool of HRM with other tools about HRM. And one is to use other career tracks, such as the teaching only one. So in some places, there is, for instance, one Russell Group University, a very traditional one, with a specific labor market. People don't leave and go so often like at UCL, for instance. Over there, they solve the problem with the teaching load having teaching only people. So it's like, okay, we remain old fashioned and we give the new kind of experience to the others, to the entrants. Okay, research function, that's really, really English. In Italy, when I try to explain this to Italian colleagues, they don't understand. But research is deeply understood, something you do for your own interest / your own career. So you want to do that, you do that on Saturdays. So that's quite important, an ingredient of this kind of situation. Above all, governance is not supposed to be a self-governance by academics. Definitely. It's basically something that used to be in a kind of past that is almost totally forgotten by now, especially if you made all the stuff redundant, you erase memory from an institution. So the academic profession is diluted. That's also something Michael Shattuck said years ago, some years ago, and basically he's continuing to say the same kind of things, this under further dilution, and I also believe the same. So it's about serving the senior managerial team. No, sorry, it's So a latent function interpretation. So these redundancies, these voluntary redundancies are a piece of a wider and long-standing structural precarization of the academic profession. I will deny my own words here shortly using Friedson theory, but definitely it's part of it. It restricts the core of protected academics. So at UCL, there is the so-called Article 18, and informally in the institution at UCL-wide, not institute education, but UCL-wide, those have a contract. So the first time I was told this, I said, I also happen to have a contract. And they said, yeah, research only. So they were a little embarrassed to say that because they realized all of a sudden they shouldn't have said that in front of me. But that was reality. So there is a small core of people, typically associate professor, but even better if he's full professor academic track. This kind of policy definitely pushes the idea to obey to non-academic pressures and to both academic and non-academic people having the role of the manager to you. And that's quite interesting. It is really top-down rather than bottom-up. In Italy, it's still bottom-up. I mean, people elect the rector. I mean, people meaning the staff. Okay. Over there, I mean, I was part of the academic board elected. I was elected. I mean, it was basically automated because I was part of the union, and that was non-professorial academic staff. Translated, the board was not counted much. It was just, raising issues to the provost and president, which is the same person. So that person was forced to answer questions, writing down dossiers, but no more than that. There is also this idea of the next round. Who's going to be the next under this kind of situations, especially in places like KSD, which is a Scottish teaching intensive university, and P, which is a so-called post 92. Post 92 universities are those who were declared universities not in 1992, but later. In that case, it was something like 2004. So overall, the control of the profession by professionals, meaning the academics, is reduced to a minimal threshold, which is a minimal, never had an inferior to that one, at least according to what I can understand from books also about the history of history of universities. Never heard about anything like this one, this situation in the UK. Now, Friedson, I don't know if ever you know this person. I found this author quite important because I'm back to organization, society organization, business. That's the stuff I need to teach right now in Italy. And since I need to teach also in medicine in these days, I found back this one, which I used to know, but I forgot this one. It's not really known in higher education. So basically, this person with a PhD in Chicago, then working for many years in New York, was basically the person who established medical sociology. So a person doing stuff about medicine, so social medicine, so the labor market of doctors, but also the relationship with patients, etc. So formalization of professional control is a process whereby professionals, in the very act of exercising a job, which implies relatively absent external scrutiny and evaluation, loses at least some part of that control. That's Friedson answer to two possible hypotheses, precarization and deprofessionalization. In an article published in '84 or something like that, a great article, one of those whose PDF is really, not really, you can really highlight, clearly a scanned version of something printed for real, which I really like. It's old fashioned. And it really explains very well how an American hospital was organized in the 70s and 80s, which is something we understand in Europe as neoliberal because of new public management and whatever Margaret Thatcher imported from the US. And then we in the continent imported from England, UK, or whatever as, the fashion of the day. So this seems it's been in place for a long time, and now up to even more critical levels, which is something I have already said in the previous slide, but I wanted to reinforce. So drivers, enlargement of the profession. Definitely, there are many more staff members in UK universities because they need to teach a lot of students, and basically, usually you cannot have a classroom made up of more than 15 students. It's a piece of regulation, at least at UCL that was the case. So if you recruit many more students, you might have the lecture which is made up of 200, 300 students if you have a place which is suitable. But then when you do the seminars, which are mandatory, you need to multiply the seminars. That's how you need to have many more people doing the teaching. And PhD students are not enough because you cannot overuse PhD students. So like everything in life, when you have one smartphone over 10 person, the person with a smartphone is a genius, he's cool, etc. If we all have smartphones, the problem is who has the coolest. Okay, that's the kind of situation. Now the new form of funding, I don't know whether you know David Willits. I happened to have met him multiple times. He was invited multiple times to CG because basically, frankly, he decided to give CG a lot of money. And he's the person behind the 2011 main reform about new form of funding in England rather than the UK one. And he was a Remainer in terms of Brexit, by the way. So my personal opinion is that he's really one of those politicians, one of those few politicians really understanding the sector. Now, non-professionals, managing professionals, in this case, it's a matter of non-academic managing at top and middle level as well, academics, even full professor ones, which is something that the traditional university does not happen to do. Appointments rather than elections, appointments trump elections at academic collegial relevant roles. So it is top-down rather than, it's a top-down flux of power rather than bottom-up. In order to let you understand something, during a job interview I did in England, I was asked what I was thinking about collegial job in a university out of an old publication I did about managerialism versus collegialism. After a while, I understood that the answer I gave was not what they wanted, what they expected as the right answer. They expected the right answer to say something like, I will serve in any collegial body what the managers will expect from that collegial body. Whereas my answer was a little more traditional, though still respectful of the strategy of the institution. That's not enough. You can say, I respect the strategy, but then we have something to make happen by ourselves. That's not enough for them. Now, I try to put something into a diagram in order to explain a little Friedson kind of idea. So in a kind of traditional university, the knowledge elite is basically made up of the academics, not by non-academics. Okay? And the HR is just a bureaucratic body which has no power. So if we read via Barton Clark's way of thinking about, for instance, the Italian universities, personnel kind of division doesn't count anything. And that's why it is broad. And here there is the relationship. Now, that kind of theory was done to explain the relationship between doctors and patients, but we could import that talking about staff, teachers and students, for instance. And the market, which is orange, like the HR could be, is not impressing that much power on the rest. And so here we have self-control of the profession. Now, if we move something into something more similar to what does happen in the UK right now. We have the market imposing multiple drivers, quality assurance, whatever, and also the knowledge, and now also the ministry is, infiltrated by the orange kind of entity, which is the market. And now we have human resource management for real, imposing some power top down, and this one is, in my artistic intentions, blurred, meaning that it is less powerful. In this kind of scenario, we don't have that much self-control. Now, references. This is the very last slide. So unfortunately today, no fancy features. So I was thinking about a screenshot from Dobson Choice movie, but another time. Pick a university. We have a few minutes. Do you want to know something more about one of these 8 universities? Just select one of them. I can't speak about one of these to you. I can tell you something which is not over the slide.
It's age.
Age. Okay, age is one of the few I was not doing interviews. It was William Locke doing interviews over there. Basically, I did all the interviews, but at H and C. All the rest I did them. But it's okay. Let's talk about.
We can do the A.
A.
A is of the Russell group.
The A, the first. That's the only university without voluntary redundancies. And you know why? Try to guess. Think about the UK and what the UK is. United Kingdom of Great Britain and so UK passport. It means UK means United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. That's Northern Ireland. They don't have voluntary redundancies because in Northern Ireland, you don't fire people if you are a public employer. Probably you just can't because of some agreements, Good Friday kind of. Because I mean, I was in Belfast multiple times in my life. I also did a job interview just upon my PhD, which was long, long time ago. I don't even tell you when. And it's a dangerous place. Okay, over there, a university is an employer in order to keep society calm. So that's why they don't really fire anyone. Now, there are other problems. So over there, that was the Russell Group one. So you know the name now. Okay, but in principle, you don't know. In principle, you don't know. Don't tell that I told you. Okay, but basically over there they have a problem of heterogeneity across the schools. Because yes, it's Russell Group, but it's like, yes, but not so Russell Group everywhere. So basically what they're doing in terms of HR vision here, they want to pursue some transition from the old academic styles into a new one, which is more performing and accountable to drivers of competitiveness. So this sounds like thinking about the 90s and the new ref, or the first ever research evaluation exercise in any given country. Okay, so that's a quite strange case. Okay, you want to pick another one? P. It's a post-92, so as I told you, it became by royal charter, as it is said in the UK. I guess this university got some royal charter a century ago in order to declare itself a university because it was a colony. Pretty sure there should be kind of paper somewhere. So a post 92 is trying to develop professional and vocational employability. So people enroll there in order to get a job. It's like training, almost like training. Okay? But over there, no, I was there twice, meaning in 2 different years. Okay? That's a desperate situation for financial reasons. So they needed to fire people because they don't have money. But at the same time, the second time I was over there, the toilets and many new rooms were totally revamped. So I found some rooms for students made up of sofas very fancy, fashionable sofas included USB ports, sockets, you know. And in fact, I found some few students enjoying these sofas. But when you speak to HR director, the point is, we don't have money, etc. But they spend a lot of money they don't have because they need to pay back the banks for these kind of things in order to attract students. And at the same time, they need to pay some consultants from London for an extortionate, I don't know how many digits. I think it was something like 5 digits. No, it was 5 zeros. It wasn't 6 zeros. It was 5. Can't remember. No, I think it was maybe 6 zeros, so above £100,000 to tell them how to make redundancies. Okay. And that's the head of HR was talking about. He was really sincere, saying that he was desperate with cases about going to tribunal. And I mean, one of the interviewees, actually I can tell you she was from Hong Kong, and she wanted to be interviewed in a place which was actually, I'm serious, a storage. So she didn't want to be interviewed inside her room. And the second time after 2 years, actually she was not anymore in that university. She fled, basically. She was not very far away. So I told her, look, I mean, either by telephone, by Zoom, I go to your new place, I get to the train, I go to your place. Okay, so I interview, I mean, to your place, your working place. Okay. And she didn't want to be interviewed. So the second rounds of interviews, I got some mortality of people for many reasons, but those having not a nice story to tell, many of them they didn't want. In this university, another person basically disappeared. I was trying to, I emailed her, it was another person, I emailed her via Facebook. That's the only profile I found. It was not even LinkedIn. And I came to know that that was a case of mental health, a serious one with depression, etc. In this case P is really, really traumatic, and people, I mean, I remember I interviewed the person, she was not even 30, so she was happy because at the time she was working as a self-employed, so she was happy to enjoy a salary, I mean, salary every single month. And she told me during the first round, she said something like, and I can still doing some consultancies on top of the salary. I said, good, nice. So flexible conditions, etc. After 2 years, she was in a pretty different kind of mood. And she told me that she just can't make any consultancy. I mean, she could, but in which moment of the night? Okay. Because of the teaching load we were talking about. So systematic use of redundancies in that place. But case D, for instance, they had a lot of problems with a previous HR director. I interviewed the new one from Southern England. He's in Scotland. So a lot of stories about the former redundancies, then this new person coming from the NHS, from some hospitals, etc., trying to heal the situation over there. When I was back after 2 years, he was not anymore the head of people, which is head of human resources. Why? The institutions thought to run a new round of redundancies. So the person putting his image over there said, no, it's not going to be me. Okay. So you have this kind of on-off situations, like, rain falls in England, you might have sunshine, then all of a sudden you have the opposite kind of weather. Maybe you have the same over here. I don't know, but that's pretty typical. And case F is the kind of Russell group having no real redundancies, teams. Usually there is a drawer in some place in human resources department with a plan, usually. But that's even, for instance, the case of C. I was not over there. I mean, I was over there one weekend for holidays. It was a weekend in that place, but I'm not telling you which place it is. It's a nice place. And they have a plan, people know there is a plan. People know, staff know that they could apply anytime, but they decided to keep this low intensity threat. And that's perhaps something making sense. Okay? So you communicate something to staff. So although this is a very, very safe place, they don't have financial problems, but it is there, okay, outside the corner. And case B, Viviana could talk about case B a lot. But case B is, the HR director in case B told me, why should I make people redundant if I can suck people on the ground that they don't really publish research? Okay, this used to be a teaching-only university, okay? It's a post-natal university. So people who some years ago were in their 50s spent most of their careers in a place where research was not needed. So, and I met some of the people. Viviana knows the kind of target of people. They cannot really do research, but they are good in teaching. So to make them redundant or even to pretend to fire them is no sense. But they're 50, 55, they get £60,000 per year. They can get for 35 a person who just got a PhD with some publications. And if they have no experience in dealing with students, they don't really care. Because the argument of we have market imposing us teaching blah, 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 that's metrics. That's not actual quality. And that's back to who does control the profession. It's not the good of academics per se, deciding who is renovating via blah, 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 okay. And so on and so forth. Case H, they did redundancies. I know for a fact, but I know from other sources. So I cannot use in this paper, but I know for a fact. So basically, they were not really talking that much about this. Mind, and this is gonna be the last word before opening the floor because we are exceeding. This is dedicated to be told, but I will tell you. For this paper, although we have 118 interviews, the senior managerial members and senior manager people and the HR directors were interviewed only in the first round. For the second round, since I was not the PI of the project, I was told you don't really need to interview these people. My interpretation was, since we are getting these stories out of the project, now I block you making this kind of data collection. I was told also to push my own research agenda. I had to explain my boss that those kind of stories were coming out by themselves when I was doing the interviews. Because we talk about careers. One of the first things an HR director is gonna talk to you in these places is unions, redundancies, and people complaining
cases,
cases. Cases means something like I oppose the rejection of my promotion, making a case. So I go to the unions or whatever. In principle, you could go to tribunal. In principle, before going to tribunal, there is a whole procedure which is time-consuming, etc., which is pain in the neck, as Hugo says. I have another part of the body. For explaining this, I'm not going to use that one. Okay, so it's been tough to collect this material. It's been fascinating. I strongly believe in telling the truth. So that's why I want to do this paper, and I'm happy Viviana is joining in this data exploitation. So I don't know. Well, if you have any questions, you most welcome.
Yes, so just a very quick question. So you didn't do these questions directed on the topic. This was emergent from questions that we're doing in the framework of a larger project or something like that.
The project
just
was,
to be clear.
Yeah, the project was academic careers, and we were interviewing head of departments because they got their own careers, but they decide promotions. And also the idea, to be honest, at the beginning was to interview also one member of the senior managerial team in order to introduce ourselves and to have a broad picture of the university. But these stories were coming by themselves, or at least as an interviewer, I make these stories come out. That's my job. Okay.
Well, typically academics are quite chatty, I don't know. But I'm happy to talk and so I get to say I'm interested in, your career and stuff. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm saying that because in my case, when I interview people, I'm always interested also to know about the gender difference, And sometimes I don't even have to ask because, academics are so chatty and so happy, and at some point we're going to remove all the issues you need.
All right, any questions?
Well, I can start. I mean, fascinating. I can't imagine like losing half of colleagues in my department. Right? So it's just so interesting to see. I have so many questions, but I want to start with two questions. One is, it's not only about UK. I know there is a very similar scheme in Australia, the redundancy scheme. I wanted to know what's the different kind of operation between Australia and UK system. That's my first question. Second question was really interesting how you describe people perceive research as individual, personal goal. But in the UK, this evaluation system, REF, this research excellence framework, I understand they kind of evaluate the team-based research, and so they also evaluate research culture, research environment.
Yes.
Then how does this value conflict, how does it work?
Yeah, you are supposed, when you put your ref through to talk about the research culture and environment, I think that would be fascinating to analyze what the departments say about their own research culture, because at least for what I know, they always pack up, the paragraph in the application with very fancy things about, how we act as a team. But I'm sorry, what I notice is that very often they try to put together, you have very productive individuals in your department, and they do their own research as they like. And then at the end of the rest, they kind of wrap it up, build a narrative where we look like a team, but it doesn't really reflect reality. It's a way to build a narrative very often, at least in the social sciences and business. I work in business schools where, well, in two cases, it was more kind of research oriented, and the last one was more teaching oriented. And it was always the same. You do your research, do what you like, and then at the time of the ref, we try to, to build a narrative and show we have a research culture. But what's really important is the kind of score you can get thanks to the fact that your people are publishing in top journals, top rated journals. So that kind of score is very important. I don't know if you want to add.
Yeah, I mean, if you organize seminars like we're doing right now within internal staff in the department, you can show that you're doing a great job in terms of research culture. But if I was here with the contract I had at UCL, which was teaching only, I couldn't knock at the door, Hugo's door, to say something like, shall we do a paper together? The most likely answer would be, I'm here teaching only, go to do the seminars. Are you sure about the feedbacks you got are so good?
Well, I think we're really good at building these narratives. This happened to me. I did something, I did a kind of consultants, but it was on my own. And then all of a sudden, I realized it was used to build a narrative in the press research environment, paragraph. And then it was like, what? What did you do? And then the way they put it with me was like, we did that because it's just great to show, yes, but I even did it in another institution, not even here. Really, it was quite astonishing. So
yeah, I wish one day I had time to develop your point, because once upon a time it was possible to poach people for fixing the ref. Now it is becoming much, much less frequent, my guess. But a few years ago, there was this Stern report allowing universities to don't import, to don't have portability. Portability of grants. Portability of grants. So if you have a grant which is £200,000, you cannot bring with you the grant you got at University A if you want to be poached by University B. So that's a big present. The Association of Employers, the Association of Universities gave to themselves, basically, because that killed the academic level market. I remember Simon Magid said, going public about that the day after this happened. So it was something like 2017, something like that. So it would be nice to make some post-experimental research assessing the pre and post this reform. I think this really killed the labor market. Yes, and it is not so competitive. I mean, the ref is not competitive in the sense that it is not contestable. I mean, if you are in the School of Education and Society at UCL, there used to be Institute of Education. There's no way you will be number 7 in the world from QS. There's no way. There are hundreds of staff members over there. So size, the volume of, I mean, you need to pick some 4-star publications. And in education in the UK, this is done qualitatively. There is one person deciding what is 4 stars and what is 3 stars. It's not like CAPS in business, which is, by the journal.
Yeah.
I remember the Pro-Vice Chancellor at UCL, David Price, I can make the name, who asked publicly, is this guy from the Wales? Are we happy with this deciding about the ref in education? And there was this person, former colleague of mine, at this education said, yes, we are happy about that. And David said, okay, we are happy about him. I mean, it's not like Premier League and we see at the beginning of the year whether Arsenal is going to win the championship. It's not, doesn't work that way. Okay, so then how do we know about research being treated, time for research being treated like something you should do on Saturdays? Now, people say this, I have time for research only spare time, but also non-academic people in managerial positions, they really don't understand, or they act like they didn't understand the fact that academic people stay at home to work. So the point is, you come here 3 days per week, and then you want to have more time for your own research, which is done on your sofa at home. You do that on Sundays. Now you come here to teach, and now increase your teaching load because that's where money are coming from. Now, that's the big average, and then for instance, case F is okay. That's I remember one academic professor person who was promoted in between the 2 interviews. She said something, it is unfair, it is not what I like, but we solved the problem this way. Meaning we got teaching only people we used not to have, which is downgrading some part of the academic estate. Okay.
It's so interesting. I think we didn't present it here, but we had quotes about that. People saying, in order to get your time for research, you need to show me you're good at it. So you needed to get your publications first, show me you're good, and then I will give you a time for research. And you think, how does it work? But clearly, when you are young, academically very young, and you just got your doctorate, you really you will try to do everything,
there is an expression which is protecting your time. That's a specific way of saying things in England or even in Scotland and Wales. Protecting your time, which means that me, your online manager or head of department, I believe you just retreated. So I will make it possible for you to teach not too much in the first 2 years because you need to push your own research. This happens if relevant manager believes in you. Never had in 6 years and a half anyone believing in me to be regard at UCL. But sorry for speaking about my own kind of experience. But overall, having interviewed many of these cases, I was in a situation which was a privilege, right? Because UCL in many regards is much, much better than the average of the UK as a whole, which is very heterogeneous.
All right, I think we have a question online. Yes, can you just ask.
Here is the question.
So the question is by Jeannie Gu.
Yes.
And she says, thanks for your wonderful presentations. I have a few questions that I would like to ask for a better understanding of the subject matter. Number one, what factors prompted British universities to offer voluntary redundancies to their staff, and how has this trend evolved over time? And the second question, in your research, what were the most common manifest functions observed when universities implemented voluntary redundancy schemes?
Yeah. So for the first question,
I would say the second one is easier to answer. I think start with the
let's
second.
start. You do the second, I do the first.
I think the second one is the easiest because it's the most manifest kind of function. What typically what they say is either financial constraints, you know, if we have financial constraint, we are very, very sorry, but we need to go through that. Another case is a change in strategy, you know. We are aiming at becoming a global, I don't know, highly ranked university. We want to climb this rank. We want to be the best or almost in the discipline and so on. So we're going through restructuring. Restructuring might also mean, I will say, you know, our process will be also smoother, maybe better processes, a better life for everybody, new systems. So we go through restructuring. We say, you know, the scenario is to make university much better for students, staff, and so on. But in fact, we are very sorry. We need, you know, to go through VSS, voluntary redundancy as well. So I would say these are the two manifest, which are very often discussed also publicly, you know, by HR, with HR people or people in charge of implementing. And the first one, so you go with it.
Yeah, for the first one, yeah, financial issues. So when once you have a system which is based on the number of students you have, and your financial situation is based on attrition you have for students. So basically, you have 100 students this year, but the point is, which is the likelihood you don't lose anyone following year because people may disappear for whatever reason. Maybe they don't have etc. You have a very short cycle, financially speaking, and you need to repay mortgage in 2 decades. So basically, in the last 10, 12 years, in the UK, say in Britain, so Northern Ireland is specific context. The main factor is this one, but we advanced such an interpretation, which is the following: the system needed to accelerate a change of the skin, like for a snake, you know, when a snake is changes skin or something. The system really needed to accelerate this change in mentality, change in mindset among staff, where to reduce the density, the union density, which is a minor preoccupation by employers, but once they do redundancies, they realize that unions, at least few people, they know the regulations very well. That's what they do on Sunday night, and they do that for real. I mean, like politicians, you know, they're kind of unionists. So then they need to have younger people because they believe maybe they use better technology in teaching or whatever the reason, for many reasons.
You also need to mention public funding that got lower and lower in the year. So
yes, and yeah, so these are the factors. I mean, the manifests are financially derived. But I strongly believe that maybe they don't want to say that explicitly. Sometimes they're not particularly aware, but they started to want to change this, to accelerate this change of mindset among staff. A little more clerk employee, a little less, I do what I want because I'm an academic.
Let me ask you, oh, sorry, you want to?
Is that a microphone?
yeah,
Okay,
no, because they were asking about the trend. I mean, we don't have data here
No, we
about
don't.
the real
They're
time.
not
We don't have
available.
data about that. I mean, some people anecdotally, they told me, now it's getting more common, but we don't have the data. There's also not much literature, because our literature review, when we really looked into, literature, looking into this in the UK, we didn't find that much. So we don't have the data up to show a trend.
Yeah, another source might be, I mean, in principle, let's sketch a possible research design. If you look at individuals at his repository, which is the one I use for the Brexit paper, if you don't use stocks, but you use fluxes because you can trace individuals, you can see how many people exit at a certain age the system. They might be redundant or just going in different universities offshore or just going to the private sector. So if we had that kind of availability in terms of big data, that could be deduced. The point is you can see how many people exit in one way or another, but not exactly under voluntary schemes, which is really confidential. So you don't really know. But now, campsite education and these kind of press, they speak about, oh, we are about to have a new wave of redundancies. But then you don't have other figures, other stories about redundancies. They happen, but they don't speak.
I'm just wondering to what extent, Juan and I wrote about the perceptions that PhD students have about the academic working conditions in mainland, and how does this affect their eagerness to join the academic ranks or not. To what extent does this influence PhD students to enter academia? Because to be honest, based on what you've shown me here, I would go to the private market, labor market. Because if I want to have a boss on top of me telling me what to do, so on and so forth, I go to the private sector and I'm going to make more money. So, how does this affect?
And your work-life balance would be
Much
better, which was a big plus once upon a time for us. PhD students, we didn't interview PhD students in this research. My guess is that in the UK and even in Italy or Portugal and Spain, the countries I have spent at least 1 year of my life, PhD students don't know this. They don't really realize all the way the kind of problems they almost put themselves into. They put one foot inside this kind of, which is the submobile in English, this kind of, when you have the kind of sand.
Quicksand.
The quicksand, I was not remembering it. Yeah, you have one foot in the quicksand, you still have time to go out. And that would be interesting. I don't think they're pretty aware. When you are first year doctoral student, sometimes you still don't know how tough it is to publish. Can you imagine redundancies that happen around and you don't understand why? There's not more than naming that door. You don't know whether the man or woman went to London from Hong Kong the other way around or went to pre-retirement. The official truth is I chose to make a turning point in my life, a new chapter in my life, and it's gonna be, I still have to decide exactly which kind of adventures I will endeavor, whatever. This is kind of the posts you see over LinkedIn or Twitter. That's what they say when you have the final tea party. So officially it's, I took some money, but it's because I want to consider other opportunities. So there's a lot of shame among people who are speaking in the UK about going public on topics like this. It is, something like your ego is under threat. Whereas in a place like Italy, they would start saying fuck off to a group of people. It's a different culture.
Yeah, I've seen that with my former PhD students as well. The system is really so individualized that if you don't make it, it's your fault. So, and also what I was surprised in the UK, there's so many people, they want to become PhD students there. And also many people coming from other countries because they say, I go to the UK, I get a PhD there, I go back to my country, I will get a top job, or I will go into academia in my country. I know the place because maybe my uncle is an academic or so on. Really, so many people, they go to the UK, do a PhD and back. Some others not. I mean, if you're doing your PhD in a business school, then you can go to the private sector. But I've seen it's unbelievable how many people they want to get a PhD there, and how easy it is to find a teaching assistant.
Yeah.
We never had problems with teaching assistant.
You expand a lot. You really, expand the labor supply.
Yeah.
And another issue about awareness among PhD students. In many countries in Europe, mostly the northern ones, we never found something like that in Italy. They develop services for PhD students in order to help them realizing opportunities, etc. That's something that I have explored a little because it's more or less as well. So it is becoming important because they realize, unless they use PhD students and fresh PhD holders like sort of slaves, it is important for universities to understand what letting them do later in life, which is something I have asked myself for my own future when I was still in my 20s and without any successful solution for myself. Not that much, but it is an increasing problem. Also, if people become PhD students for either taste for science or for not having clear ideas about their own futures, which is exacerbating the issue of what shall I do next. Okay. I asked this to many people when I was receiving PhD proposals every single week because it was UCL. Now I don't anymore. Because what next? What do you do with this? Yeah, well, it is cool, isn't it? Yeah, it is cool. But what's next? Okay.
Okay. Any final question? Alice, please.
Ultimately, you just use the word downgrading when you talked about academics who are not very good at research and who have to switch the teaching track. And also noted from case E, the use mentioned less prestigious career. I assume less teaching track. So I'm always puzzled about this stigma about teaching track because I met some school directors, some head of departments who work really hard to educate us, administrators, and teaching staff that teaching track is not actually new. And actually, some of our lecturers and principal lecturers just earn as much as the bookstores now. And some of them actually feel relieved when they were offered a teaching track position and they no longer have to do so much research. Yeah, they actually feel relieved, and even students don't look at them as inferior to research track staff. But of course, I understand that when they first join the university, they have this dream of becoming a tenured associate professor or professor.
Well, in relation to what students perceive, I can tell you that especially among the undergrad, they attend the seminar, they don't understand whether you are a PhD holder with 10 years after Viva or you're a PhD student. Sometimes they just don't understand. They don't even have an interest about that. Okay. Talking about the image positionality of teaching only stuff. At UCL, there was something entering into force when I became teaching only. That was one of the reasons I chose that one, because I could have got a promotion to grade 8 research only, but I wanted to be permanent staff for once in my life. It was the second only thing I had permanent in my life, on top of marriage. She's my wife, okay? That's why we have kids here. If you didn't realize, we are husband and wife. Okay, so because there was a teaching form for that, which was written down, giving me access to grade 8 instantly. It happened after 14 months. I had all the arrears for Christmas 2021, you might remember. And no, it was 2022. Yeah, well, after 1 year, yeah. And but no, academic people understand research, teaching only staff as people delivering seminars. Now, if you did a PhD, you didn't publish that much, you like to teach, a teaching only contract is good because you get a nice salary and you don't complex your life with research. In those 2 years I was teaching only, I was continuing to do research. And I almost instantly realized that in order to be fair, especially to those younger than me, it was like switching off a nuclear plant. You cannot do that instantly, and it is dangerous if you do it. So I decided point I tried to figure out whether I could really switch off research in my life and just doing teaching. But then after a few weeks, I said, no, I apply for other positions. So it could be good for individuals if you don't really learn to do a lot of research, etc. But definitely at institutional level, it is a choice. So you might, I mean, for instance, at case B, they didn't want teaching only people. I mean, I give you academic track, therefore you need to publish. And if you don't, I may consider to fire you. Long story short, only one person was approached to be fired that way, and it didn't work. Because then you got the unions, tribunals, etc. The only way to have change of staff is to make voluntary redundancies because you pay money. But once we were looking for a place, you remember, in Huddersfield, so we were having a person, an agent, showing us a place, an apartment, a terrace. Okay, so small talking, blah blah blah. She was saying, I work at the University of Huddersfield, and he said, I used to work at the University of Huddersfield. I was a teacher, but they gave me a lot of money. Now I do this job, much happier. I mean, an estate agent, I mean, showing just apartments.
But he was a very chatty guy.
You can imagine what kind of teaching was happening over there. Chatting.
I'm sure many of it's teaching only, they are just great, but the perception, probably, there are many reasons, even related to funding, rankings, international rankings, and so on. Just to take an example, just a few days ago, I was having a chat with one of my former teaching students. She's working for a top business school, Russell Group University, teaching track. She's great at teaching. And she was talking about the head of the department, about the possibility for her to switch to the research track. And then he said, why? You have been here for 2 years, you didn't publish that much. And then she said, well, of course, I have a lot of teaching to do, And then he was saying, well, you didn't show anything till now. And what you do, it's not building up any value for the business school. And it was really harsh, but this is, I think, the kind of underlying idea here in many universities, that if you're teaching, you're not building any value for us. Once I was told, we have students coming here anyway, because of the agreements with China, with Hong Kong. In my university, I had a lot of agreements with China and India. And they told me, they will come anyway. And I said, what? I don't think our students are very happy. They will come anyway. Don't worry with agreements.
Yeah, it's a labor supply plus a lot of students coming there anyway because it's England. So if a university is low in rankings, from the English mindset, it might be low in rankings, but it is still English. So whatever is English is higher than Polytechnic of Milan, which is decent worldwide. Okay? That's the way to think. Another thing I forgot, which is relevant for your question, which was great, is you might have HR managerial tool, which is that of pigeon people toward the teaching only track. So you have traditional academic track, and I decide as a manager to make you just teaching only, so you can teach more for me, and you give up research, which is something but not that great. Okay. The point is, do you really have the power to do it, to implement it? Since you need a person to say, yes, I'm happy about that, you will end in most of the cases to recruit brand new teaching only people who just got a PhD, and they will work by night to finish some research. Because, it is very hard to change status quo. Okay, something like already existing stuff who's been there for 20 years. Yeah, it's really tough. So that was the main point in case F, for instance. But even in case H, they managed to swap this kind of things, and some people got promotion. But I suspect we interviewed at case H those who are friends to the head of the department. So we got some stories which are strange, not really reflecting what I know about case H, and I know stuff about it.
Okay, I think we can conclude here, but before we conclude, well, we first can have a hand for the presenters. Thank you very much. It was really great. This is unusual, but we have here the speaker for the seminar on Friday. So, Viviana, if you want to do a pitch concerning the next seminar, feel free.
Yes, so the seminar on Friday will be on a different topic because I will talk about gender equality measures, and it's a part of my research which comes from my experience. Actually, I worked quite a lot on implementing gender equality plans when I was first in Switzerland when I did my PhD, and then later on in the UK. And we will have to see what's going on there, because we know that gender equality measures have been there for quite a few years now in Europe, especially, but things are struggling to change. And I know here are people so interested in talking about the gender equality. So we will see what's wrong, what's going on. So it's some kind of conceptual reflection, provocation piece. But yeah, I hope to see you there if you're interested, or just tell your friends. Thank you.
All right, thank you everybody. And I think we can conclude the session. All right, thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
Including those online.